Hi. Today I want to talk about the fifth language skill. Now we've all heard of and are aware of reading, writing, speaking, listening as being the four key language skills. Well, I'm going to tell you today that there is a fifth language skill, and it's called forgetting. Natural, relaxed forgetting. It's a very important part of language acquisition, and I'm going to explain why. I'm sure all of us have had the experience that if we try to remember a name that we know of a person, of a famous person or someone, a friend, and all of a sudden we can't remember that name, the harder we try to remember, the less likely we are to remember. As soon as we let go, there's a greater likelihood that we are going to remember. Now, we know through the work of Geoffrey Hinton and others that every exposure with the language is in effect not an effort to retrieve something specific, but rather part of a process of regenerating a network of connections in our brain weighted slightly differently each time. So that we need to have, and I've said this before, many exposures to the language in a relaxed way so that the brain can accumulate these networks of connections that form our control of the language. The more relaxed we are, the more often we expose ourselves, the more willingly we accept the fact that we're going to forget things and not deliberately try to remember them or retrieve them, the sooner we're going to build up this mass of competence in the language. This, by the way, doesn't only apply to things that we forget and that we should willingly forget and not worry about forgetting when it comes to parts of a language that we're learning, words, structures, things that we don't understand or don't recognize or can't retrieve. We have to accept all of those willingly, but also for someone like me who has learned many languages to different degrees of, fluency or competence, I have to accept that languages that I am not working on, I'm going to forget them. Because the way the brain works, these languages that I'm not involved with, I'm not listening to, I'm not reading, the brain makes room for the, say, Arabic and Persian that I'm trying to learn now and pushes my Korean away or pushes my Greek away. And this is perfectly natural. And if I were, worried about losing these languages, then I wouldn't be able to enjoy my new languages. And I wouldn't be able to enjoy the wonderful feeling of going back to a language that we have studied before, because the language is still there. And when we go back to it and we retrace the things that we listened to before, maybe simple things like the mini stories or more difficult content about history of Greece or Romania. As we retrace our steps, we rediscover the language. It's easier than it was before. It's easier going, and we discover wonderful associations that we had with what we were learning, the words, the sounds, the pronunciation, the content, where we were when we were first learning these lessons. All these wonderful associations can come back to us as a result of having first put the effort into learning those languages and then willingly having forgotten those languages and not worried about it. I was thinking of this the other day as my wife and I were watching this Japanese series on Netflix called Mampuku, which we very much enjoy because it takes place in the 50s and 60s, and we were in Japan in the late 60s, early 70s, or much of the 70s. And it's wonderful to reconnect with that delightful way the Japanese speak, with the sort of connecting thoughts indirectly with filler phrases that are so delicate in so many ways. And so to reconnect with that sense of the Japanese language is very pleasant. But while I've been away from it, I haven't been thinking or trying to make sure that I can reproduce some of those polite forms of the Japanese language. Should I need it, something will happen, something will come. I don't have to worry about how I do or what I forget. I've mentioned before this French golf instructor on the internet called Renaud Poupard, who has a wonderful, relaxed approach to the golf swing. And he has helped me relax. He has helped me just try to get a feel for the golf swing. Don't worry about where the ball goes. And the more I'm able to do that, the better I hit. The more I stand over the ball and try to think about what I should be doing, the less well I hit the ball. So that whole idea of a natural approach, accepting what you forget, accepting what doesn't turn out the way you would like, is important in the golf swing. And I haven't yet, gotten to where I want to be, but it's also true in language learning. And, it's interesting, this whole idea of remembering things. When I was learning French, I was very keen on Georges Brassens, who is a chansonnier. And I couldn't really understand his songs that well. It was part of the sort of my romantic feeling of what I wanted to be a part of in sort of French culture at that time in the early mid-60s. And he has this song, which is basically a version of a poem by François Villon, the Ballade des Dames du Temps Jadis. In other words, the wonderful women who were, whether it be Jeanne d'Arc or whoever, and now they're no longer with us. And he has this wonderful phrase, Où sont maintenant les neiges d'antan? Again, I'm going from memory. I can't remember. It doesn't matter. I don't care. Les neiges d'antan to me is a wonderful French phrase. The snows of yesteryear. Even the word antan, which apparently comes from ante annum, the year before, which now has come to mean, yesteryear. But in fact is archaic and is seldom used. But that whole flavor of that phrase, les neiges d'antan, the snow of yesteryear is no longer there. It's gone away. Not the case with languages. We keep them. They are not like the snows of yesteryear that melt, So really, we rely in a way on involuntary memory. So every effort to deliberately remember things, and you've heard me before, I'm not a big fan of deliberate retrieval exercises. However, if we rely on a natural exposure to the language and we allow these sort of networks of connections to accumulate in our brains and not worry about what we can't remember, we will eventually end up stronger in the language. And it'll be the involuntary memory in the items that we remember almost involuntarily that are going to enrich our language. And when I think of involuntary memory, I think of Proust and his association with the tea-soaked Madeleine, which brought up memories of, again, temps jadis, previous time, à la recherche du temps perdu. So all of this sort of memory as something that we can enjoy and savor in an involuntary basis as we accumulate our comfort level in the language. I think the ability to do that is as important as the sort of deliberate learning to write, to read, listen and speak, the sort of traditional language learning activities. And to the extent that in the school system we put far too much emphasis on getting things right, emphasis on remembering things. And in that way, we sort of put pressure on language learners and deny language learners that sweet pleasure of remembering things in a natural, involuntary way as these networks of language connections accumulate in our brain. Off on a bit of a tangent again. I hope this made sense. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.